Hey, Sai, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Hey, good. Thanks for asking. So, I'm waiting for the interview.
Good. I know they're really excited to speak with you. Hi, this is Gabrielle.
Hey, this is Steve Wilkerson and Pete Burley from AT&T. Sorry we're a little bit late.
Hey, guys. No. You're totally fine. I have Sai on the call for you.
Perfect.
Well, yep. I just wanted to jump on the call to get you guys introduced to make sure that everybody's able to connect. So I'll let you take from here.
Perfect. Sounds good. How are you doing today, Sai?
Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you? Thanks for asking. Just waiting for you.
Not too bad. Thanks for asking as well. Kind of give you a little bit of background about what we're doing here. Usually Matt McEwen handles this part, but he's lucky enough to be out on vacation right now. So, long story short, traditionally, AT&T is an OpenStack shop. We've got a rather large OpenStack deployment for our private cloud for networking and SE purposes. Traditionally been a little bit behind current OpenStack releases just because it's a lot easier to use vendor distribution. Usually takes a little bit more time for a large enterprise like us to get closer to master the newer releases. It's been about 2 years since I joined AT&T. Around that time, they kind of wanted to change that and move forward and both start leveraging the newer releases of OpenStack, but also start contributing more upstream so we can reduce the deltas we have between the upstream OpenStack repositories and the distributions we're running internally. The team that Pete and I work on currently is focused on working on the next generation control plane for our OpenStack deployment. So that includes deploying the OpenStack services and Docker containers managed and orchestrated with Kubernetes and Helm. So we just play with a lot of really cool kind of leading edge technologies, and we've thankfully had a little bit of wiggle room to test out what works and what doesn't. That's a little bit. I mean, that's kind of the background of what we're doing. Did you want to give us some background about yourself, what you've been working on, and what your interests are?
Yeah, sure. So, thank you very much, guys, for taking your valuable time to talk to me. So, myself, Sai, I've been, primarily working as a Devops engineer or a senior solutions architect on the AWS environment on cloud infrastructure from past 7 to 8 years now. So, I have pretty solid experience on entire SDLC, like designing deployment of architecture using best practices like around security, auto scaling, and doing blueprint deployments and canary releases. And in the current project, I'm actually working with Best Buy on their cloud consulting and infrastructure team. So in the current project environment, I'm actually working on OpenStack environment. So I had good experience on deploying OpenStack as an application on Kubernetes environment. And I was actually using close to 1,000 nodes on Kubernetes environment. And as part of the current setup, I actually managed the, I would say like continuous integration Jenkins, Artifactory for repository management, monitoring of this application using Prometheus, and also worked with deploying Docker private registry. So where I was actually able to set up, create config maps, debugging some of the network administration on Docker, running it on Docker Compose as well as Swarm mode as well. And as part of the current environment, I had set up a 3 master and 1 minion, like 1 master and 3 minion architecture on the current environment. So I had pretty solid experience on connecting, debugging connecting issues on pods environment in Kubernetes as well. And I was actually deploying and managing this OpenStack using Tectonic. So Tectonic is the universal Kubernetes that I was using for the OpenStack environment. That is the current role that I work with.
Hey, it's Pete here. I am one of the lead engineers on this project. That sounds pretty interesting. You said you're working with Kubernetes clusters with up to 2,000 nodes. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the current one is close to 1,000. So it's close to 1,000 nodes on Kubernetes.
When you've been moving to that sort of scale, have you been involved in the design and implementation of that size of cluster?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So I was actually involved with setting up this entire cluster like I was actually using Mirantis. So the current setup actually, we actually started with 175 bare metal machines, where I was actually allocating 3 of them to be used for Kubernetes control plane services, Kubernetes scheduler and API servers. And then we had other 5 virtual machines on each node, where every VM is used as a Kubernetes minion node. And I was actually worked with Prometheus on kind of monitoring this entire 1,000 load cluster as well, which is a large Kubernetes cluster environment. And I was using the Cargo tool.
Oh, okay. And were you making any modifications to Cargo? I mean, when you are working with that size of cluster, what sort of design aspects are you cognizant of, and what are you looking for in terms of the overall design and deployment?
Yeah, sure. So as part of a pretty large environment, some of the design considerations is we wanted the scheduler that we are deploying on each separated node, and also some of the things regarding how we wanted to handle the cluster load with default settings on the kube DNS environment, and also networking, where with the help of kube proxy, how we are accessing the servers, load balancing, setting up the Nginx proxy. Those are some things we had to really take care of that. And also what is the low default rate limit on each of these environments are also another things that we had to take care. And the OpenStack services, they were not handling the PXC pseudo deadlocks. So that was also another thing we are taking care of while doing the architecture design for this environment.
Okay. So that's quite interesting. Did you do any work with the etcd cluster that was underlying Kubernetes at all?
Yeah, which one? etcd cluster? Couldn't hear that.
etcd. ETCD.
Okay, no, I couldn't hear that. It's ECG?
Yes, are you familiar with that technology?
Yes, I was familiar with that. So primarily the main thing is that one of the things I was using is Kube to kind of work with those clusters. I got your question right.
Okay. And you also mentioned sort of working with OpenStack and database deadlocking. Could you describe how that manifested and how you went about solving that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. It's a pretty good question. So the symptom or the issue was that whenever we were running in parallel, it actually creates operations of lots of resources that were failing with kind of a DB error saying that Percona extract cluster identified a deadlock and the transaction has to be restarted. So I was actually finding the root cause for it. So the root cause was I was actually getting the Oslo.db, which is responsible for wrapping the errors from the DB intro proper classes, and I was actually experiencing the similar errors because not all transactions could be restarted properly in the Nova code. So I was actually doing an upstream issue status fix. So the bug has generally been doing a Percona deadlock error detection and then kind of doing place in Nova, and then I was actually resolving that one.
Okay, that's interesting. And also, you talk about managing Kubernetes charts with Helm. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, sure. Pretty good. So I was actually using the Helm as a kind of more of a package manager, and then I was using Helm charts to make it to kind of package and then deploy primarily. So as part of the current environment. And one of the cool things that I was actually doing for the deployment consideration with Helm is that I was actually searching for a chart, installing the chart, and then after the install, we had a particular deployment strategy with Helm. So that's the thing I was actually following with the help of package manager like Helm. And I'm actually as part of the CI/CD pipeline, I was actually managing the releases of the chats. So. Yeah.
Okay, and when you're looking at Helm and writing a template for use with Helm, are there any sort of particular things that you're looking to bear in mind? Sort of how would you construct a Helm chart?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, like, for the Helm job, like, actually, what I'm currently doing is Helm should actually delete the job after it is successfully finished. So I was actually creating different stages while authoring this, I could say Helm chart for, defining what jobs it has to run. And the first of the things is that, like, when I create the required files, like, you have a Helm directory or, a particular chart where I wanted to link, like, the .yaml file. And within that, like, chart.yaml, I'm actually setting up the metadata, like, what is the name, the description, the sources, and the maintainers. And then within each template, I'm actually working on the YAML, like the release-wise heritage chart component, and then defining each stage of the job, like that I wanted to run with Helm. So those are the jobs I'm actually doing. And then once the job is successfully finished, I would just say, like, metadata name, what is the template, and then delete that job after it is completely finished.
Okay. What sort of applications were you? What sort of applications that had Helm? Did you write the Helm charts for those applications, or were you using upstream charts, or what sort of applications were they? Just web apps, or something that's a little bit heavier that needs domain state or has dependencies?
Yeah, sure. So we are actually working with heavier applications, like custom applications apart from web apps. So previously I was deploying a Java-based application on Kubernetes with the help of Helm. And also, like, previously I have experience on deploying container with Helm on Azure Kubernetes as well. That's custom ones.
Okay. And so when you were deploying a Java application with Kubernetes, could you describe sort of how you performed that?
Yeah, sure. So primarily as part of the current, I could generally walk through the steps. So we need, I was using Helm charts to create them, and then I had a Docker environment that was running. I actually used a mini cube that is installed, and then a Kubernetes that is cluster is running. And then I was using a tool called Tiller, Tiller, with the help on the Helm, actually, both of them, to kind of build the image, then kind of publish this Docker image. And then finally we have a chart.yaml file, which includes the metadata of the Helm chart, like what is the version description, and the requirements.yaml file while doing this deployment, and values.yaml where I wanted to say, hey, this is what I wanted to deploy into the Kubernetes cluster. And then that's how I actually followed, updating the source code on the Helm chart, and then finally deployed the Java application.
Okay. And did you? And what was this Java application running? Was it Tomcat, or was it something of that nature?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So this Java application is a transaction-based application primarily, which is I think you might have heard about something called as microbean Helm. Microbean, which is a Java API for Helm generated from the .proto files. I was actually using that as well with it.
Okay. And something else that sort of catches my eye, just looking through your resume. You were saying you were running container-based database and services. Could you talk a little bit about running databases in containers?
Yeah, sure. So I can talk about running Oracle. Recently, I actually ran an Oracle database in a Docker environment as well. It's Oracle database 12c that I was actually working on. Also ran Oracle database XC as a Docker container. So as part of that, I was primarily going to the Docker store, where we actually get Oracle database, then kind of implement it, where we have Oracle Docker build files, and then you should generally have a couple of files where you wanted to unzip them and then put into a directory called Docker image master, and then you have an installer that you can actually get to an actual database, create the first container, and then use the Docker run to actually define parameters for mappings of the database. And then the Docker run will actually call Oracle DB and then automatically create a database. And in this case, it's a 12c. So I actually confirmed the container was successfully running by using Docker ps command. And then that's how actually recently deployed. And finally, I look at the Docker log command to actually find out if everything is running properly.
Cool. This is Steve again. I see you've got written on your resume that you've used the elk stack before. Can you kind of explain to me the sort of applications you were using that you were looking to gather information about with the elk stack, kind of your approach? Were you using that for Kubernetes environment? Was that a traditional, Docker Compose environment? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So currently I was using the elk stack on Kubernetes. Like I was logging using Elasticsearch and Kibana. So it was primarily for the Kubernetes environment that I was actually installing, and also had experience on installing this elk on the AWS environment apart from the Kubernetes environment as well. So one of the things that I was actually doing was like stateless storage, where this Elasticsearch kind of uses stateless disk storage, like that I was actually configuring, and primarily scheduling only one Elasticsearch data pod for each node on the Kube environment. And I was actually creating some custom batch templates as well. So I was actually using Helm to kind of create a render template and then use those queries to get the data and finally display it on the dashboard, on the Kibana dashboard primarily.
Okay, I'm sorry. Did I hear you right saying that you had one data node in your Elasticsearch deployment for Kubernetes? Was that right, or did I hear that wrong?
Yes. Kubernetes ELK cluster. That is correct.
Okay, just curious. Why did you go with Logstash instead of something like Fluentd?
So one of the main things with that is that because the Kubernetes service descriptor actually publishes the Logstash, so it's much easier if you wanted to say join the Elasticsearch client node container, Kibana container, for communication wise, and deployment wise, I was just using Logstash forwarder, much easier to integrate and then manage the certificates while doing deployment and access the service. So that's why it's went with this one.
Okay. Do you have any experience with Fluentd at all? Have you looked at it? Have you played around with it at all?
Yeah, which one? Actually, can you please repeat that? Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Fluentd.
Which one? DMC?
No, Fluentd. Fluentd.
Oh, Fluent?
Yeah, Fluentd is a centralized log aggregation service that's traditionally, there's some examples in the Kubernetes repo for it. It's traditionally used in Kubernetes.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, sure. I understand. Actually, it's not clear. So, for log analysis, Fluentd is also a good one. I was working with the daemons in Fluentd, but we went with the log analysis on Kibana. So, Fluentd.
Okay. So, just kind of want to get an idea of what your interests are. What out of the technologies you've mentioned today, what do you most enjoy working with and why?
Yeah, sure. I'm actually really passionate about cloud environment, and also recently I just started working on looking into something called as PKS, which is a pivotal container service that recently Amazon and VMware actually announced, which is a self-serving Kubernetes environment, pivotal container service. Really passionate about technology and how it works. So I'm actually looking forward into working on being more of an architect, designer, design the architect of big environments and so really worked on that.
That's interesting. Something that occurs to me, you described in the past using things like Nagios and other monitoring tools. How do you see those tools fitting into a Kubernetes type architecture?
Yeah, I think for monitoring, currently I was working with Prometheus for setting up cluster monitoring, created the dashboard, and then set up some health metrics. And one of the thing is that I was actually scraping pod level info using Prometheus. So for each of the configuration, I think you have to just set up the annotation on each of the pod. And then I was actually working with the Grafana query as well. So you can just make sure that you can create a Grafana graph that is actually present in Prometheus. And that's how I was actually working on monitoring on the Kube environment.
Okay. And what sort of exporter are you using for Prometheus to get the pod level metrics?
Yes, that is correct. And actually deployed Prometheus in the environment, and then also set up the services, like created the node exporter, and then
Okay. So I saw you also had Heapster listed here. Could you explain to me some of the differences that you've seen between using something like Heapster or Prometheus to get information about the pods? And
yeah, sure. So I think one, like the relationships between both Heapster or also like if you're generally using like Prometheus, one of the good things is like for scraping and storage, I think good to go with Prometheus. And also like if you wanted to, I was actually working on doing a POC with both of them and actually went with Kubernetes with Prometheus. And I was actually working on like adding metrics in Heapster. And one of the main thing is that actually Heapster is limited to Kubernetes container metrics, but it's not general use. And Heapster only provides metrics back as a REST. It does not have any query language, and it does not have any form of alerting. So if you have Prometheus, that's I think pretty good thing compared to Heapster.
I'm very much inclined to agree with you on that front. So have you done anything with Prometheus beyond just what the out-of-the-box exporters offer, so things like Kube state metrics and the node exporter? Have you ever messed around with trying to write exporters for any of the applications that you're actually running in Kubernetes, or is it just for your cluster?
Yeah, sure. So I was actually working with collecting some of the graph Kubernetes metrics as well. Like as you know, primarily you can use Prometheus that can actually collect this metrics like say CPU, memory, file system, network, and then also if you are any daemon like via API. And I was actually configuring the collection of these metrics too. So like adding the sources and then storing them. So yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think that's been a really great conversation. I think possibly what we should do is try and arrange a follow-up in a week or so, where we can maybe try and get some other people on the line to sort of see where potentially we may be a fit within the project that we're organising. Do you have any questions for us at this stage about what it is you would like to do, or what you would like to try and find out about what it is that we're up to?
Yeah, sure. So thank you guys. Really appreciate taking your valuable time today to talk to me. So just one quick question is, just wanted to know how big is your current team, and then how large are your environment that you're running? That would be very helpful to know.
Okay, in our Scrum team we have around about 20 people at the moment, although that is rather misleading. We actually have a collection of projects that are being worked on to form a larger picture. So the development teams actually range from about 5 people right the way down to single person teams working on a project. And so what we are doing, as Steve touched on earlier, is sort of a reimagining of data center architecture, where we are taking a very holistic view, starting from bare metal provisioning right up to facing applications. And we've selected for various reasons sort of Kubernetes as effectively the middleware to facilitate this. And so we have people working on things like bare metal provisioning of hosts up to user level applications. So it really kind of rolls on a lot of
Yeah, that's really good to know. Yeah. Thank you guys. Yeah, that's all pretty much from my side. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that information.
Perfect. Anything else?
Yeah, I think that's all from my side. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. We'll be in touch about scheduling a follow-up, and we'll go from there. So, Gabrielle, if you could send Matt an email for that would be great.
I'm on it. I'll do that now. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Gabriel.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day. Guys. Yeah, bye.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.